black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Teal!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be speaking to Teal. And Teal comes to us from Missouri. She's going to be sharing a very interesting encounter that happened to her while she was camping. But she's also going to be sharing some things that are going on and around her home, and also a park that's close by her home. She had a very, very scary encounter while out there. And it kind of reminded me, I was talking to Doug Waller. I'll see if he'll share it tonight. But there was an encounter very similar to Teal's. So you'll definitely want to pay attention to what Teal says and then listen to the encounter that Doug will be sharing from Ohio. And obviously, it's my second guest, Doug Waller from Ohio. He's an investigator out there with the Southeastern Ohio Society for Bigfoot Investigations. And he's been doing it for many years. He's been looking into reports, talking to witnesses, and he's actually written 3 books: Standing in the Shadows, Hidden Encounters, and Screams in the Night. You can email dwaller465@gmail.com. I believe Doug is selling them for $18 a piece. So if you get a chance, check them out. Hidden Encounters, Screams in the Night, and Standing in the Shadows. So look for Doug coming on later on in the show. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. There's a daily blog. You could become a member, get additional shows, help support the show. So if you get a chance, check it out. But let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Teal to the show. Teal, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
No, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had 3 encounters, and I posted them to the blog, I think it was last week. But for the audience that hasn't heard them, I know one was when you guys were camping, and most of the other encounters are happening around your home, even a playground that's near your home. But if you would, for the audience, would you kind of start from the beginning and walk us through these encounters, if you would?
Okay. My first encounter, basically, we have a recreational subdivision kind of camping lot thing, where you can camp and fish, things like that. It's about an hour away from our house. We go out there quite a bit. It's our lot's pretty secluded, so we have like one neighbor. But anyways, it happened in the summer of 2014. It was Memorial Day. I went camping with my husband and 2 of my friends and my 1-year-old at the time. We had a long day. We went swimming. Everybody was pretty pooped. My husband had actually decided to go to a friend's campsite that was about 5 or 10 minutes away and kind of hang out that evening. My friends and I, we kind of made dinner and just kind of lounged around and finally decided to go ahead and go to bed. So anyways, once we all settled down, we kind of fell asleep, and I had awoke in the middle of the night, and I heard footsteps over to the right-hand side of, like, by my head, towards, like, right next to our tent. I kind of sat up a little bit. I figured it was my husband. I figured maybe he had come back from our friend's site, and I yelled out to him. And when I did, the footsteps had stopped. And that freaked me out because my husband, if it were him, he would have instantly been like, hey, it's me. He knows I'm a scaredy cat. And so I kind of sat there for a few minutes, and the footsteps picked up again and kind of went all throughout our camp. But they kept coming back to our tent, like over to where I was sitting, like where I was laying. And at that point, I got freaked out, and I thought, like, who is this? I kind of pulled my daughter closer, and I was kind of trying to like peek out the mesh windows, but it was so dark I couldn't see anything. We had no lights, no nothing, so it was pitch black. So the footsteps went on for at least 45 minutes to an hour. I ended up falling asleep, and the next morning when we woke up, I was hoping that it was my husband and he would be maybe falling asleep in our camping chairs or something like that. But when we got up, there was nobody there. He wasn't there. He ended up spending the night at our friend's tent, camping site. And he swears he never came back.
Yeah, it's strange. Very strange. To walk up to someone's tent, especially in the middle of the night, could be very dangerous, and to be going through someone's camp. Did you hear any vocalizations or anything, or could you hear it breathing, or?
No, everything was dead silent. It was literally just footsteps. You can hear it crunching in the leaves. And even like where the footsteps had started, which is weird, like the way our campsite is, there's an opening, but that was like where our fire pit and stuff was. So in order to get to my side of the tent, it actually had to come up through the woods. So if somebody would have stumbled into our camp, it's not even where my tent was, isn't even where they would have come into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. It's very strange and scary, especially being out there hearing footsteps around your tent, And so did you just kind of brush this incident off and then?
I did. I totally just kind of forgot about it until this, our last summer, the summer we just had. We went camping again. By this time, we have 3 kids now, and we took all 3 of them just for kind of an impromptu little camping trip to get away. It was one night. Same campsite, same lot. The lot we have, it's our land, so no one else camps on it. It's no one else's. We went back, had a completely normal camping trip, nothing out of the ordinary. I had taken a ton of pictures, and when we got home, I was going through the pictures, and in one of the pictures I had taken, my kids were all sitting around the campfire eating marshmallows, and there's eye glare in the back of the picture. I had shown my mom it, and she thinks she can see an outline of a body, but I couldn't tell personally. I messed with all the filters and just couldn't tell, but that one up there, as soon as I saw it, it instantly brought this back up to me, because it's like, what could that be? Because, if you look at where the eye glare is and how my kids are sitting, whatever this is has to be super tall. So.
Yeah, and did you send me that picture?
I did. I linked it to the original email. I also sent a picture of our campsite so you could see how everything was set up.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. That's a little creepy to see something like that in a photo,
Definitely creepy.
And was it close to where you guys were camping? Were you guys kind of in the same general area, or?
Yeah. See, our neighbor, we have 2 lots in between our neighbor and I. So there's like kind of this. See, our lot backs up to a lake, and there's a service like a gravel road that kind of goes down there, but it's blocked off. So whatever this was just right out of the camouflage. It was right there in the shadows. It had to have at least just been on the edge of our lot, kind of staring. It looked like it was staring at us. So
it's very strange. And Teal, you want to tell us about the encounter at the house with the window tapping?
Yeah, it was our second encounter, or my second encounter. It was New Year's Eve, 2014, or the last day in 2014, and I was home alone. And my husband had went out to a party, and I didn't want to go. And it had started getting late, and I got all the kids in bed. As I'm cleaning up and doing stuff, I could hear somebody walking around on our deck outside. And I instantly was like, wait, this is too early for my husband to be home. So I kind of walked over to the window, and I looked outside, and I couldn't see anything out on the deck. And I kind of shrugged it off. I was like, maybe an animal had climbed up there. And I kind of went back to cleaning and messing around, and I started hearing taps on my window. And it started at my kitchen window. Instantly, I freaked out, like, what is that? So I grabbed a flashlight, and I went to go look out. I couldn't see anything. I kind of sat for a few minutes. I turned my TV off and just listened. And then I heard it tap on my bedroom window. So I go run into the bedroom window, and I look out it. There's nothing there. And this probably happened at least 3 or 4 more times kind of throughout the night. But it tapped on my kitchen window more than anything. And the more I got to thinking about it, my kitchen window, it sat about, I'm only 5'3", and if I stood on my tippy toes, I can't touch this window from the outside. It's tall. So I had called my husband, and he come home, and he kind of looked around, and, we couldn't see anything. With it being winter, the ground was frozen, so there was no footprints or anything like that. And then a few days later, it was in that same exact week, I had left something out in my car. And this was on the other side of the house. So, and it's the only side of our house that had a porch light. And the porch light wasn't that great. It probably reached out maybe 10 feet off of the side of the house. It barely even touched my car. So I get about a few feet out my door, and, I'm not paying attention. I'm staring at my feet, walking along, and I hear this super low growl that almost turned into kind of a scream. It was so terrifying, and I could feel it. Like, it felt like it bubbled my guts. That's how hair-raising it was. And as soon as I heard it, I just instantly turned around and I hauled back to my door. I slammed the door. I went running in. I started crying. My husband's freaking out. He's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, I explained to him what I had heard, and he goes running out there with a gun and a flashlight, and he can't find anything. And, he's like, well, maybe it was a bear, or maybe it was a bobcat. And so instantly I started getting online and listening to all these videos of the noises they make, and I couldn't find anything that matched this sound. I still haven't to this day found anything that sounds remotely like what I heard. After I had wrote you, I totally forgot to put in, we actually moved a few months after that had happened, and we moved just across the street. And this probably happened at the beginning of this summer too. My husband had left to go out of town for work, and I had gotten out of the shower one night, and I heard my dog growling, and I kind of stopped, and I paused because it was dead silent in the house. Everybody was asleep. It was just me up. I was like, why is the dog growling? And I heard something tap on my front kitchen window in the new house. So I freak out. Yeah, I go up there with a flashlight and look out the window. I can't see anything. I called the cops, had them search my whole property, and I never had it happen again after that. But it totally brought me back to that night when it happened over at the other house across the street.
The tapping on the window is just creepy. You hear of that type of behavior all the time. And I think if it would have been like a prowler or a peeping Tom, I think they would have caught him, and the fact that that's just weird. Yeah.
And what's really weird too is like when I first got out of the shower, like I didn't even hear the tap right away. I heard the dog growling, and I was like, what is he growling about? And when I first looked on, like I turned on my, like a light kind of near the kitchen. I didn't want to turn all the kitchen lights on because if it was somebody there, I didn't want to scare him away. I wanted to see who it was. But the dog he was a puppy at the time. He was backed up in the back of this crate, all of his hair standing up, and he was terrified. And it just tapped on the window 3 times, just tap, tap, tap. And that's all it was. But it was almost identical to what happened at that other house right across the street.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Well, tell us about I'm curious about the last encounter. Now, how close to that was that to your home and to some of these other areas?
My very last encounter that just happened that was like a few days ago. This happened maybe 5 minutes from my house. Oh, wow. And if you would you walk us into it? Yeah, definitely. There's a park by our house. It's called Robertsville State Park. It backs up to a river, and they've got a massive campground and just completely secluded in the woods. It's out in the middle of the country. It was a really super warm, sunny day, and we had gotten up super early. So it's like I want to take the kids to the park, take advantage because this might be our last nice day. And we go to the park, and usually it's pretty full. There's tons of people there hiking and camping. And when we went this particular day, it was like a ghost town. There was nobody there. There was no cars, no nothing. So the playground's about halfway into the park. So we go in, and when I park, or the playground's like circled by woods. So there's one road in. It's the same road in that takes you out. So if anybody would have been down there, you would have seen them. There's no way you could have not. So we get out of the car, and I notice there's commotion up in the woods, just heavy commotion. Like it sounded like 3 or 4 guys just stomping around in the woods. But I didn't really pay much attention to it because, normally when we go to this park, it's pretty full of people. So there's always sounds, and it didn't catch my attention too much. So the kids get out of the car, and they take off running to the playground, and they start yelling and cheering and playing, and the commotion in the woods had stopped. So the kids get to playing, and there's nothing weird really. I mean, my daughter, about 15 minutes in, she starts complaining that she has to go to the bathroom. And up behind us, there is a restroom. So I gather all 3 of them, and it's about 2 or 3 minutes distance away from the playground, and we get to walking up, and the whole time we're walking up, it's just this eerie, weird feeling like somebody's watching you. I mean, we got about halfway, and I had to stop and just kind of look around me. That's how odd it felt. And we get up to the bathroom, and I actually locked the main door to the bathroom when my daughter was in there so nobody else would come in on us, just because it just felt like somebody was watching us. We make our way back down to the playground, and I'm actually sitting on a bench that if you're in the woods, you wouldn't be able to see me sitting on the bench. It's kind of blocked by the playground. Kids are playing, and I hear this loud crack noise. And it instantly caught my attention. It sounded like it was right on the wood line. It was almost like a wood on wood sound, if that makes sense. I kind of stop, and I'm watching, and a few seconds later, I hear another one. And then it's followed by a tree hitting the ground. And I mean, it had to have been a massive tree. I mean, it hit, and you could feel the vibrations in the ground when it hit. My daughter stopped, my oldest stops playing, and she actually asked me what it was. And I told her, I was like, I guess a tree fell. But, I'm staring off into the wood line, and I can't see anything. And we kind of go back to, the kids go back to playing, doing what they're doing. And I start hearing footsteps coming through the woods from where the tree had fallen, probably about halfway in between me and where the tree had fallen. And it sounds like it's maybe just a few feet away from the wood line, and it's walking the wood line up towards us. And I stand up, because obviously at this point I hear the footsteps, and I'm freaked out. So I stand up, and I look out into the wood lines, and I look at my kids, and I'm like, guys, get to the car, let's go. The footsteps stop, and I kind of crouched down because my kids didn't hear me. My daughter was like, what'd you say? And I crouched down to tell her, and I can hear the footsteps start again as I crouched down. And I at that point, I yelled. I was like, get to the car now. And I grabbed my 2-year-old, and we all took off running. As I'm throwing the kids in the car and trying to get in myself, I can hear these footsteps stomping up. And I mean, I'm fully expecting to turn around and see somebody staring at me. And these weren't like normal footsteps. These footsteps, it sounded like somebody was going through the woods wearing like tennis rackets on their shoes, like snowshoes. I mean, they were huge footsteps. So I get everybody buckled in, and I just sat there in my car, locked the doors, and I'm just staring out at the wood line for it seemed like forever I was staring. And my daughter starts freaking out, and she's like, let's go, I don't want to be here anymore. So we kind of creeped our way out, and even on my way out, there was still no one. There was no cars, no nothing. The only car that was there is at the ranger station, and I mean, even that's pretty far from the playground. So I don't think it was just anybody stomping around in there.
That's a terrifying story. That's a really terrifying story. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. I mean, that's one of those weird situations, and isn't it funny how we, as humans, we get that, like when you're walking to the bathroom and you feel like you're, all eyes are on you. It's just a weird sensation too. I'm sure most of us have experienced, can't even talk tonight. Most of us have experienced that, as adults, but it's a weird feeling that you get. And no one saw anything. They stayed in the wood line the whole time.
Yeah. And I mean, here in Missouri too, all the leaves are falling off. So, it was still thick to where you couldn't see through, but I mean, I couldn't see anything. So, I mean, and it sounded so close. So whatever it was hidden well. I mean, I couldn't make it out. I couldn't see anything. And, and like right when we started running towards the car, I fully expected to turn around and meet somebody face to face. I mean, the wood line was only maybe 3 car lengths away from where I had parked. So, I mean, we're talking pretty close. It was close.
Yeah, and you would think, they do have a fascination, it seems like, with children, especially when you hear encounter stories with them. And so I would imagine a park like that's a perfect place to sit there and watch kids play all day, if you wanted to. And that's terrifying. I mean, that's really is terrifying. I love your description of it wearing like tennis rackets for feet, because you're right. It's really hard to explain that to someone, because, a footstep is a footstep, but it's not. Yeah. It's not when you hear them. These footsteps. It's like I guess it's almost like it covers more ground, so they're louder. It's way more distinct. Yeah.
And it was not human, whatever it was. Because I mean, I've only been hunting a few times with my husband. I mean, I'm not like a huge avid hunter, so I mean, but I could tell the difference. So. It makes sense in my head. I mean, I understand exactly what you mean. And too, if it would have been a bear, you wouldn't be describing footsteps the way you're describing them. And I think a bear, if it would have been in that area, obviously heard the kids, knows you're there, and a bear would have came out. If there would have been something wrong with that bear, but it would have came out towards you guys. And and it was weird. Like, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Okay. It was like what really freaked me out was that like when I was ducked down and blocked by the playground, it would continue walking. But as soon as I stood up, it was like it froze. It just stood there waiting to see what I was going to do. And I think that's what freaked me out even more. And I was like, I mean, I got 3 kids. It's not like I could just grab one and go. I got to get all 3 of them in the car. So that was, I mean, that's what scared me the most was wondering, how am I going to make sure I get all 3 of them in this car and get them safe?
Yeah, it's scary. Have you been back to that park?
I haven't. My daughter, she now calls it Sasquatch Park. She doesn't want to go there. And my oldest, like anytime I even mention it, because I mean, it's right by her house. And anytime I mention going, she instantly freaks out and she doesn't want anything to do with it. And, for her, that's weird because they love the park. So, I mean, it didn't just scare me. It obviously scared her, too. So,
yeah. No, I don't blame
I've been trying to talk a friend of mine because it's a campground, and I've been trying to talk her into going camping with me up there, but we're both too chicken.
Yeah, well, be careful if you do that. It's definitely terrifying, but I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing it, Teal.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And next up on the show, I want to welcome Doug Waller to the show. Doug is a researcher and author. He's written 3 books, Hidden Encounters, Screams in the Night, and Standing in the Shadows. And if you'd like to get a copy of his books, they're $18 each. You can contact Doug at dwaller, DWALLER, 465@gmail.com. To contact Doug, if you want to email him about an encounter, or if you'd like to contact him about his books. Doug, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Wes. Pleasure to be here.
No, I appreciate you being here, Doug. I know you're an investigator for the Southeastern Ohio Society for Bigfoot Investigations. Kind of a mouthful, but I know you're very serious about it. And I know you go and you take reports and you follow up with people and you collect evidence. And I want to get into some of these encounter reports that you've looked into. But before we do that, what got you interested into Bigfoot, Doug? Because I know you haven't had an encounter yourself, but how did your interest start?
I've always been interested in it. I think my first recollection of Bigfoot would have been back in the early 1970s when the Missouri Monster was making headlines. I don't recall the Patterson-Gimlin film when it came out. I was still in high school then and probably still chasing after cars and girls, and I must have missed it. But,
yeah.
But when Momo started stomping around in Missouri, I did become aware of that, and I took an interest on it. So I would keep abreast of anything that come on TV or magazine or newspaper articles. And then in the 1980s, I started going to the Bigfoot meetings that Don Keating ran in Newcomerstown, Ohio. And I attended a number of those and, still remained very curious and interested in it. But what piqued my interest was in 1992 when I got hired by the Guernsey County Library in Cambridge, Ohio. And I suddenly had all these library books at my disposal. So I started reading everything I could on the subject and soon exhausted the source that we had on our shelves. So I went through the interlibrary loan system and had books sent from other libraries. And I just couldn't get enough information fast enough. It seemed like I was always reading 2 or 3 Bigfoot books, at the same time. Once I went through that list, I discovered that if I could come up with a title and an author, and we would send a fax to the state library, they could get books from clear across the country. So I know I had stuff coming in from California, Washington, Oregon. I had some of John Green's books that were hard to get over here, and Vance Orchard and Mike Clast out of Minnesota. So I've had a very extensive reading list that's probably over 200 books. But, that still doesn't qualify me as being an expert, because I feel there's no such thing as an expert in this field. I started researching in 2006 and had some other people that were interested in this field as well as I, and we started our group, the Southeastern Ohio Society for Bigfoot Investigations, in 2008. And we like to just call it SOSBI because, it's a hell of a lot easier to say, SOSBI, than all that mouthful.
Yeah.
So we would do investigations, and we started having meetings and campouts and speaking engagements. And it's grown now to where I actually have written 3 books, and I'm working on the 4th. Just been crazy with, speaking at libraries and civic groups, and did 3 conferences this year. Put over 2,000 miles on my car this fall, just driving around to libraries and stuff and speaking. And there are so many stories out there yet to be found out. That's what I'm trying to do. I've got a pretty vast collection of Bigfoot books that I own, and I treasure these books. I like the book rather than the e-book. I like to be able to hold it and turn the pages and walk in the next room with it. But
I'm kind of the same way.
So many of the classic tales in there, Patterson-Gimlin and Ruby Creek and Fred Beck. I've got I got several books that tell those stories, but what I like to hear are the ones that I've never heard before. And that's what we find a lot when we go to these library talks and stuff, and we present the evidence. We don't try to force somebody to believe in these creatures or not. We just put the evidence out there and try to answer questions as best we can and let them decide. And
well, let me ask
found
you.
That you can,
Let me ask you, Doug, what evidence are you presenting for people to make their mind up?
Well, a lot of people are, believe it or not, some people are under the misconception that there is one Bigfoot. Then, there are family groups of these creatures, and a lot of people, some of the witnesses that I've talked to were so shocked when they had a sighting, and they thought, well, first of all, I didn't believe in these things, and if the smallest, remotest chance that they were an actual creature, then they certainly weren't in Ohio or West Virginia. They were out in the Pacific Northwest. And other people said, well, I'd heard of these creatures and didn't think much of it, but they were always supposed to be black or brown. And then when they see a white one, it just totally blows them away. And, some people also thought, well, they're always listed as being upright and walking like a man. Well, they do, but they'll also drop down on all fours, and they're quadruped then, and vice versa. They can switch from one to the other. So we just kind of try to educate people. And one thing I will say, probably of the dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of witnesses that I've talked to by now, well over 50%, maybe 75%, were total skeptics when they had their encounter or sighting, whichever it was. They didn't believe in these things at all. And the shock of that thing standing in front of them, blinking its eyes and its chest going up and down, expanding and contracting. And they thought, that is not somebody in a costume. That thing is a living, breathing animal in front of me. I don't know what kind of an animal, whether it's a beast, a monkey, a human, or what, but it is something that's alive.
I'm curious, what's maybe a couple of the most interesting encounters you've been told, or someone's come up to you and shared with you that really stuck with you?
Well, of course, I kind of cut my teeth on the Lorena Cunningham story from, she was featured on the Finding Bigfoot program. As a matter of fact, when the producer called me back in 2011 and said that she'd found our group on the internet, and she said we were going to be coming to Ohio and staying in Cambridge, and we're going to be shooting video out at Salt Fork, and we want to know if you can hook us up with some witnesses. I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I was aware of Lorena Cunningham having not just one, but 2 sightings and then another encounter. So I introduced the producer to Lorena, and she made the final cut, at the town hall meeting, and she was featured on the program. But she had an unusual daytime sighting back in 1984, and I believe the whole sighting took place because she had 3 children with her, and the 2 older ones were maybe 5 and 7, and they were girls, and they were playing on this playground equipment, and laughing and giggling and having a good time. And then Lorena, being female herself, I feel that this creature did not feel intimidated by a woman and young children. So it come right out in the open and was like 30 yards away looking at him, and of course Lorena was absolutely terrified, thinking that whatever this thing was going to run out and grab her kids and kill them and eat them and then do the same to her. But, in talking with her, she said that the creature had several different expressions come across its face, and none of them were malicious. It was actually enjoying the moment. It was grinning because these kids, were having a good time playing. And this Bigfoot, it was a female. She could see the breasts on it and see the fingernails, and, there again, see its eyes blink and its chest, move up and down. She was scared of it because of the sheer size of it, but it did not show any viciousness in its expression. Well, then, since it was a female, she thought, oh God, maybe it wants to steal my children. Maybe it had a young one and it died or something, and now it's going to steal my kids. So that was very terrifying. But I'd heard Lorena tell her story numerous times, since the 12 or 15 years that I've known her. I've never heard her change a word, in the story. And that's what really got me interested. And then, when I would interview other people and hear other stories, I find a lot of similarities in one story to the next. There's certain common denominators. It kind of helps determine whether the witness is telling you the truth or not.
Did she go into details about the face? Did she say whether it looked more human? Did it look more animal-like? Did she go into any... She actually did a sketch of it, and it's in my first book, her sketch. My first book is Standing in the Shadows, and what she has drawn looks more ape-like. I know some of the sketches that David Paulides has in his books that Harvey Pratt did. Some of those just look like humans. I've seen. I laugh and say I've seen people come in the library that look like some of those sketches that Harvey did. But, people don't all look alike. There's different ethnicities. There's, Aborigines and Asians and Eskimo and Europeans, and we don't all look alike. So is there different subspecies of these creatures? Because they certainly aren't all identical. Have you ever talked to someone who felt like their life was in danger with the encounter? Like they felt like they were really threatened?
Yes. Matter of fact, in my third book, there are 2 stories in there of people that were so traumatized by their encounters. One was an actual sighting, and the other, the man didn't even see it. He just heard the screams. But they were so traumatized they actually moved away from where they lived. When this took place, they moved into the city. And one guy actually cried on the phone when he was telling me his encounter. And he was an avid outdoorsman, hunting and fishing and stuff. And he heard the screams down in Jackson County, Ohio, at the back end of a lake one night. And it scared him so bad, he left everything he had right on the shoreline. His tackle boxes and his fishing rods and his chairs and his Coleman lanterns. He had a grill out and cooking catfish on it. And he heard the screams, and he collected his wife, and they jumped in the truck and left, never went back, just left everything. Moved about 3 counties away. He was so frightened. I kind of introduced him to 3 or 4 other people that had encounters and sightings, and said, talk to this guy and see if you can help him work through this, because, it's really affected him.
Yeah, and it does. It does affect a lot of people, especially sightings. You said there was another one where there was an actual sighting?
Yeah, there was a lady in Tennessee that was driving. She had her young son. They'd been to the emergency room for the boy. He had a leg injury or something. And they were almost home, and they lived right down on Norris Lake in Tennessee. And this thing, they were probably less than a mile from home, and this thing came across the road, and she almost hit it. And her little boy was strapped into the car seat, and she had turned her head to pin to him for just a second. She was trying to keep him awake. So when she got to the house, she didn't want to wake him up and carry him in. She wanted him to stay awake until he got home and in his own bed, and then he could fall asleep. But she just turned her head for an instant, and she saw his eyes get big, and he kind of pointed and said, "Monster." And she turned her head, and this thing was right at the front of the car. She almost hit it. Well, in talking to her, I determined that the thing apparently had been coming around the house and looking in the window. It was attracted to this little boy. She said that she had the kid was maybe 2 or 3 years old, and she had him in a Target store or Walmart or something one time, and they had the Chewbacca dolls, and he saw those, and she said he has never seen any of the Star Wars movies, and yet he saw that Chewbacca doll, and he wanted it, and he about threw a fit, and he kept calling it, my monster, my monster. And she's thinking, has this thing been around the house? And I was asking her, well, then she did report, she smelled this real stinky, as strong as a skunk smell around the house, but it wasn't quite a skunk, but she'd never seen anything herself. But she talked to some of the neighbors, and they'd kind of told her there was stuff going on. And then we did an internet search on her county and, on BFRO and some other sites, and found that there had been 3 reports. So we kind of put 2 and 2 together and thought it's possible this thing's been looking in the window at the little boy, because the little boy didn't show any fear of it. He was kind of attracted. There was a mutual attraction. But the lady just said, I cannot live there worrying about that thing, and if it's been coming and looking in the window, I saw it myself less than a mile away. So she moved, I forget, it was like an hour away to some city because of that.
Did she describe to you what she saw going across the road?
Yeah, let me look. I'm going to have to look in my book and see if I have I think she actually did a sketch, too. Let me look in here real quick and see if it says. She did a sketch, and it was a very good job, and it kind of looks ape-like. Very broad shoulders, kind of a pointed head.
And how far, do you remember how far away from her home she saw this thing?
Less than a mile. It was Old Middlesboro Highway onto Powell Valley Marina Road. Let's see the name of the town. It was down by Norris Lake. But she moved to Knoxville after this happened because she just couldn't deal with it anymore. She didn't feel safe. She smelled something like rotten eggs when it walked across the road.
Oh, so she did smell it as it was going by. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Don't you find it strange, though, some witnesses report that and some witnesses don't?
Well, I think that they're able to produce the smell, if at will, like a skunk does, or like an octopus can release the ink. But you're right, some witnesses don't report any smell whatsoever. Others do. And I think that under stress or as a defensive measure, they can emit this odor. And it's, according to her story, she almost hit it. It darted across the road, and she almost hit it. And maybe that was enough to cause it to break wind or whatever it would be called when it emits the smell.
Yeah, the other question I wanted to ask you is regarding children, because you do get these reports of them coming up to children's window, and I'm not completely convinced it's all for curiosity and fun. I'm just not completely convinced that's the only motive. And so it worries me a little bit. I've talked to little kids.
Oh, sure.
I can think of one where the parents called me, and this 8-year-old kid wouldn't stop talking about the monster at his window, the monkey. He called it the monkey at his window. And they wanted to know, they had done some research and found my website. They were looking at sounds. They were looking at everything. And I don't think the parents were convinced it actually existed. So I talked to the kid, and the kid's probably the best witness I've talked to in a long time. This kid could tell you everything about the face, could tell you everything about the teeth, could tell you everything about the eyes. Even to the point of that it's not actually real whites to the eyes. It's more of a yellowish, reddish tinge. I mean, this kid had better descriptions than I've ever heard, unless he's been a researcher his whole life. There's no way this kid would have known that. And then when the parents put me back on the phone, I said, your kid's probably the best witness I've ever talked to. And there was dead silence on the phone. And I don't think they truly believe the kid. And then, after starting to do some research, they were starting to find out that there was something going on here. I was telling the parents, there's something going on here. Something's coming up to this kid's window. There's way too detailed of descriptions for this kid to be making it up. This isn't like I saw a leprechaun type story. This kid has real descriptions that it would take years and years of research for this kid to come up with some of this stuff. But what's your take? I mean, why do you think that they come up to windows of kids? Do you think what's your opinion on it?
Well, they are extremely interested and attracted to children. And there again, I try to tell people, I don't think they have to worry about the thing, breaking in and stealing the kid, but I certainly can't guarantee that. I mean, I would hope that doesn't happen, but who knows, maybe it has. But they don't feel threatened by children. And even though they're, I think, fully aware that the children has parents in the home and dad might have a 300 Weatherby or something, and he's got to, defend that child at all costs, they still will come up and do this. I've done investigations, and you think the child would not be a very credible witness, but when you start looking at other evidence, I've taken other reports like this, and when you start adding other things up, like the neighbor across the way reported a prowler, a big guy out behind the house, and he says he ran up over the hill and he was very fast, stuff like that. And you'll find under the window, maybe not actual footprints, but you'll find where something stood there and smashed down the flowers. And I've heard of people finding handprints on the outside glass where something's been looking in. So that people really love to hear that. I just did one this week over by Dillon Reservoir. The lady heard what she thought was a siren. They test the sirens over here, the tornado siren on Wednesdays at noon, and this was a Monday at 9:30 at night, and she was standing right at the back door. She smokes, but she doesn't smoke in the house, so she had the sliding door open, and she heard this thing, and she thought, why is that siren going off, at 9:30 at night? Because it sounded like that, and then it was different, and when it stopped, she heard a series of grunts, like, ooh, 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 ooh. There was like 4 or 5 grunts, and that scared her to the point where she shut the door and came in, and she thought that's some kind of an animal, but I don't know what. And she did an internet search, and she just Googled up what kind of an animal sounds like a siren, and it eventually led her to the Ohio howl or the Columbiana County howl, and then she found us, online, and so I went over and talked to her, and we've been getting a lot of chatter on our page about that report, and found out that there were some incidents that took place 2 years ago during deer season, and they actually found tracks of 3 different individuals, and these things kind of harassed some deer hunters that were camping over there. So, this lady's terrified now, she's asking me, am I safe? Should I move? Should we get a gun? Should we do this? Should we do that? And, I say, well, it's not their demeanor is not the type where they're going to come and kick the door in and come in and murder you. But I certainly can't guarantee that, but that's not, what I know about them. And then she'll read about the Ape Canyon report online, or the Teddy Roosevelt book, where the trapper got his neck broken, and said, well, what about that? How can you guarantee that? Well, I can't.
Yeah, you do. You get that sometimes when you talk to people. I definitely understand what you mean. Sometimes it's better not put fuel in the fire. You know what I mean? Sometimes the people are so scared. And if it's not really been aggressive, I'll usually tell people, just kind of relax, take a deep breath. But you're right. You can't guarantee that stuff won't happen because you don't know the type of creature that's there, or what type of mood he's in, or that siren sounds interesting. You say that because when I first heard the Ohio howl, let's see if I have it here. When I first heard that, I thought it sounded like a Sasquatch mimicking a siren, like some sort of alarm.
Yeah.
A tornado call actually makes a lot more sense now that you say that.
Right.
The only downside to that is someone recorded that same type of sound in Texas, and another one I know of in Pennsylvania, where the guy sent me the audio, and it sounds a lot like the Ohio howl when you play it. I mean, it sounds very close.
I wondered that too about mimics, because I know they're great mimics. They're like the mockingbird of the animal world. And this lady lives very, very close to a fire department that has one of those sirens, and they test it, Mondays at 12 o'clock noon on Wednesday, I guess it is. But you're right. Other parts of the country do have recordings out there that sound very much like the Ohio howl, where the creature, I wouldn't think they would have had a chance to have heard a siren, but maybe they did. I don't know. But when people describe hearing it and it's close enough that they can actually feel the vibration in their chest, and it's not coming from the fire department because it's the wrong time, then it's not a siren. It's something else.
Yeah, you're right, and it's odd. It's odd to hear those sounds at night, and you do hear where they mimic people. I wanted to ask you, what is some of the best physical evidence that you've collected that you could present to someone as possible proof that Sasquatch actually exists, to someone who doesn't believe that it exists?
Well, stuff that I've personally collected, would have to be testimonies from witnesses. We have found tracks. Like I said, we found that hair, which didn't prove to have any DNA, but it was collected off the top strand of a barbed wire fence, maybe 4 feet off the ground. We didn't find tracks to go along with it, but we questioned the property owner about what type of animals could have been in this pasture field and left this hair. I said, now, is there any possibility of it being horse hair? And she said, well, if it had been collected from the fence that runs up along the road, somebody might have ridden a horse up the road and backed into the fence and snagged some hair off of it. But in this case, it was found on the other side, the fence that is on the interior of this pasture, and the property on the other side of that is all wooded. And she said, there's no horses in either part of that. So, but the hair that we pulled off of there was 14 inches long. And she said, well, they don't have any hair that long, even on their tails. And this was found on the top strand. But the properties had all sorts of activity, for years and years out there. We found tracks in the snow, and they would get screams coming out of the woods, and the house would be pounded on. The things had been in the barn, and the cattle were afraid to go in the barn in the winter. And then, they thought, well, why won't the cows come in? And they'd find these big tracks in the snow where the creature had holed up for the night and then come out in the morning before they got up.
That's pretty ballsy of a Sasquatch, really, if you think about it, to go on someone's property like that, go into their barn. There's a major risk there with it. What do you think it'll take to prove to everyone that Sasquatch exists?
Well, I think for science to accept this, I think it'll take a body or two. We're not advocating somebody go out and try to gun one down, but dead or alive, I think that's what it'll take is a body.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do you ever get frustrated? I mean, do you ever get, how much hair do I got to collect? How many tracks do I got to make? How many sounds do we got to record? How many eyewitness testimony do I have to collect?
I get frustrated by people that hoax things, and then I get also frustrated by, people that get on some of these Bigfoot pages. And, it's one thing to get on there and have a debate, but, other people get on there and they'll start right off and say Photoshop or fake, and then you find out they don't even believe creatures to begin with, and said, well, then why are you even on this page? I see stuff on Facebook all the time that I don't necessarily agree with or like, and I don't comment. I just scroll on by and go to something else. I get, I've had people give me their names and numbers. When we do a live break, said, give me a call because I saw one of these creatures. And so when I call them, then the lady says, well, my husband says not to talk to you. And I says, ma'am, I don't need your name. I can name, I can call you Gertrude McGillicuddy, whatever you want me to do. But please just tell me your story, because, when these people die and take their story to the grave, it's gone. And that's what I'm trying to do, is preserve some of these stories. So that's frustrating. And, sometimes I'll call the people and then their phone's been disconnected, or their mailbox account hasn't been set up and I can't leave a message. And, I've hit a lot of dead ends like that, but I've also gotten a lot of really, really interesting stories. And, not just Ohio, other states. And I'm working on a fourth book, and I've even got a story that'll be in that one from Brazil, from a man that came to one of our talks, and he was in the military and flying in a helicopter and saw one of these creatures out in the open, and it had to make a mad dash for some trees to conceal itself, but they got a good look at it before it made it to the trees.
What did he tell you he saw? Did he go into details about what he saw?
Well, for all practical purposes, his description was spot on with a Bigfoot. And, he was from United States, but the pilot of this helicopter was the one that was really blown away, because he was a local. He said, we're not supposed to have anything like that down here, and he couldn't believe what he saw. And they kept flying around this little clump of trees, and it wouldn't come out. It was still in there, concealed. He had a very interesting tale. Once he had seen this thing, he started asking some of the locals around there about it, and I can't remember the actual story. It'll be in the new book, though. Something about they'd had a drought down there a few years before that, and they had a bunch of cattle in a stockade. They'd keep them in there at night, and something would get in there and kill these cattle and pull their tongues out of their heads. And they'd find the cattle. You could hear the cattle bawling at night. Something was in there getting them, and none of the locals were brave enough to go in there and see what it was. Wow. And they'd find them in the morning dead, with their tongues pulled out. And whatever they call this creature in Brazil, and I do have that in my notes, but I don't have them in front of me, he was the one that was the suspect. They said something had a hand that could grip the tongue and pull it clear out.
That's kind of a strange way to kill an animal, don't you think? That's almost enjoying killing something.
Yeah. I wouldn't have enjoyed that myself.
Well, you even get reports of that here. It's I don't know that people have seen them do it, but what you'll find a lot in the United States, and I'm sure you've come across this, Doug, is people will be feeding them, for example, for a long time, and they know they're feeding them, and they'll feed these Sasquatches, and then they'll stop, or they'll go on vacation, or they'll leave for a while.
Right.
And when they come back, every animal on that farm is killed, It's there's a show I did on where the guy came home and all his goats had their necks broke. He had like 19 goats, and every one of them had its neck broke. And it's because I think he was feeding these things for a long time. He was in the military. He left for a time period, came back, and when he came back, everything had been killed on his property. And so you hear some of that, and it makes you wonder if the Sasquatch that's directly relating to feeding them and then not feeding them, and they get pissed. What do you think Sasquatch is, Doug? It's such an odd creature to try and describe. And obviously there's no wrong answer, but what's your own personal opinion?
Well, I'm kind of leaning towards, some kind of a human, a relic human, but then you see the ones that look like an ape, and but they definitely are intelligent. And that's what I can't get across to some people. They think, oh, it's a dumb animal. Now, if it's that dumb, how come when we put all these trail cameras up, we don't seem to get anything? It's to the point where I tell people now, if they think they have them around the house and they're worried, I said, put the lights up and the cameras, because in every case that I've worked with, that caused the activity to cease. They didn't get any pictures. The things just quit coming around the house as long as those trail cameras were up there. But, about feeding them, you're conditioning an animal, if you're putting food out, whether it's unwittingly or not. You start feeding a stray dog, it's sure as hell not going to go away. It's not going to say, well, thanks for the meal, I'm moving on down the road. It's going to keep coming back. And I used to feed raccoons here at my house, and I thought it was cute, to sit on the back steps, feed them marshmallows, and I could feed them by hand, and the little ones would come up. And, well, it got to the point where after I went to bed, they would come in, and there were more and more all the time. They'd come up and bang on the back of the house, and I'd thought, who the hell's here at 1:30 in the morning? And I'd get out of bed and go out there and look, and there's 4 or 5 raccoons out there standing up looking in, wanting fed. And I'm the one that did it. I created the monster myself. And so you have to really be careful when you do that. And people say, well, I throw table scraps out and I just throw them over the fence, but that's for the possums and coons. And yeah, they will eat that, but if that big hairy guy is cruising around, he starts coming in there and getting a hand out, and you stop, then you, just like you say.
You're right. They seem to get upset. Why do you think they avoid trail cameras? What's your honest opinion on that? Because to me, I don't even know that humans could avoid trail cameras. If you put them up, I think most humans are oblivious and walk right past them. And I would say we're smarter than Sasquatch. But the old argument that they just, it's their living room and they just notice, I don't buy any of that. There's something else going on here for them to avoid trail cameras. We can get just about any animal on the planet on a trail camera.
Yeah.
And granted, some of them know it's there. You'll see where deers will walk right up to it or bears will walk right up to it. But
I don't know, they are very intelligent. Some people said, well, they smell it, or they, but your smell's on everything. If that's your home, how in the hell do you get in unless you grab the doorknob and open the door and go in? So your smell's on that doorknob too. But I don't know if it's the infrared or what it is, but it just seems as if, there again, the experiences that I've had, we don't seem to get anything on the trail cameras. And then there again, the unfortunate situation about people hoaxing stuff. If somebody were to get excellent, video, first thing people are going to say, oh, it's photoshopped. It's it's a computer generated image. So how would you know? I couldn't tell myself if something was real or not when it comes to the technology. There again, we're back to the same thing. It's going to take a body. Regardless, dead or alive, it'll take a body before science, accepts this, except for a few, exceptions, Jeff Meldrum and Grover Krantz and some of the ones back in the day.
One other question I wanted to ask you is I wanted to know, have you ever had any reports of this eye glow? I get, eye shine, and I'll talk to people.
Yeah.
I would say 99% of it is nothing more than eye shine. But there's a very small percentage of reports to where you get this eye glow. And there's been many times where I've asked the witness directly, are you sure it couldn't be eye shine? And they'll say, no, they were glowing, like they were lit up, like Christmas lights. Have you ever had those reports? And
yes.
What's your take on it?
Yes, I have. Well, I know Steve Calls and I discussed it one time, and he said there's absolutely no way that, what's it called, bioluminescence,
Yeah.
that there's nothing in that eye, it can't do that. But, if we don't have one of the creatures on a table, and dissect it and look and see how it's made and what it's made of, I don't know how we can say that. But yes, I have had reports of the eyes glowing in the dark without any kind of light whatsoever. And it reminds me the story from Tony Healy, and there was a co-author, the Yowie. They were talking about there's a mountain range in Australia, and at the foothills of the range, they started building these homes. And one of the very first homes that was built, the occupants reported seeing out in the woods at night what they thought were some local boys back out there smoking cigarettes. And they said, it would be 45 degrees and raining and very chilly and just downright nasty. And they would stand in their living room and look out the window, and they'd see these glowing cigarettes from out in the tree line. Well, they found out later it was not kids smoking cigarettes, it was eye shine from these yowies. And they were curious about the home that was being built, at the foothills of these mountains. So I do get reports, like that from time to time.
Yeah, and it's so odd when you get them because I'm not sure what to do with them. I've had enough of them now to where, I believe people. There's no reason not to, but it's just odd. Yeah. It's odd when you hear that. Even Sasquatch is odd, to be honest with you, but to get a report like that is very strange. Do you take other reports? I mean, have you talked to anyone that talks about the lights or any other strange things? Do you do everything, or is it just mainly Sasquatch?
Well, I started out just Sasquatch, but we've experienced all kinds of very strange happenings over at Salt Fork State Park. I'm only about 20 minutes from the park where I live, so I'm over there quite a bit, and our group has camp outs there and stuff. And we've had people in our group see these very strange lights and orbs and just all kinds of, weird things. I'm going to do a whole chapter in my next book about all the strange occurrences at Salt Fork. But I cannot explain what they are. I know there's a picture in my first book of what it looks like is when you look at the picture, it looks as if at the top of the picture there was a helicopter or something hovering over there shining a very powerful searchlight down through the trees, because you can actually see the light beams coming down through the leaves and going clear down to the ground, and it's got the whole area illuminated. The picture was taken at 4:30 a.m. by one of our campers at the camp out. And when I interviewed the woman, she said it was in total darkness when she took this picture. I said, well, what were you taking a picture of? Well, there had been coyotes carrying on and yipping and howling, and they woke her up, and she had to go to the outhouse. And, she was afraid to go by herself, so she woke her father up to, walk with her. And she did about a 1-minute video trying to, I guess, capture the eye shine on these coyotes. She never did see any eye shine, but you could definitely hear them. And then when she finished with the video, she snapped one picture with her cell phone camera. And in this picture, it shows this light coming down. And I said, holy mackerel, it's like a helicopter was hovering up there shining down a light. Did you hear anything? She says, no, I didn't hear anything other than those coyotes carrying on. Well, I didn't know for some time that not only did she not hear anything, she didn't even see anything. I said, you didn't see that light? She says, no, it was total darkness. I just heard coyotes yipping, and I took a picture in their direction trying to get high shine, and there's this picture with light beams coming down through the trees. Well, then I find other people have seen very similar things over there. Now, what it is, I couldn't tell you. If I had to guess, I would say the military has something that they don't want us to know about. That's the only thing I can say. Unless you want me to come right out and say it's aliens, I don't know what it is. But I just know that several people have seen stuff like this. And you throw in the fact that it's right in areas where we hear screams and howls, and there are Bigfoot sightings, and they find tracks. Are they connected? Who knows? I know that there was a hell of a lot of weird stuff going on over in Pennsylvania back in the 70s. And Stan Gordon, wrote a very excellent book, Silent Invasion, and it's just full of UFO and Bigfoot sightings, that kind of go hand in hand. So I don't know what the connection is, but it seems like there's some sort of a connection.
There's a weird, and I don't know if you even want to go into this, but there's a weird cover-up with Sasquatch, and it's on a very high level. It's not on your low level. Your low level police officers aren't going to know about it. Probably most of your DNR guys aren't going to know about it. I think it's on a higher level, and I think it rears its ugly head when there's actual real evidence that could be collected, and I think it gets squashed pretty quick. Do you feel like there is a cover-up, and if so, do you have any idea why?
Well, yeah, I took a report. This story will be in the book that I'm working on right now, of a man driving to work. This was out on Interstate 70 between Old Washington and Cambridge, and this took place maybe a year ago, a little less than a year ago. 3:30 in the morning, and he sees what he describes as a body laying along the side of the interstate, and he described it, and his description matches that of a Bigfoot. And he said there was blood and tissue all over the right-hand lane, and he slowed down and got a good look at it, and the man has some experience with anatomy. He worked in a coroner's office for a while, and when he was in Texas, he was a paramedic. And he said, no, I could see the arms, the legs. I saw the hair on the body. I saw fingers on the hand. I saw the very large feet. He didn't see the head because the head was lying away from him, and the big barrel chest kind of obscured the head. He wasn't able to stop because of the traffic. But he said he was talking to his wife on the cell phone, and he described it to her, and he said, I'm coming back when I get off work, and I'm going to get pictures of this. Well, when he came back, everything was gone. He described the scene as being sanitized, he called it. It wasn't just cleaned up, it was completely scrubbed free. There was no blood, nothing left. I find that very curious. Who ordered that to be cleaned up so people wouldn't see it? Well, he saw it. There had to be other people see it, but I suppose most people just figured, well, a deer got hit or a cow or something. But he described it as being a Bigfoot, and I hooked him up with Sibylla Irwin, and he did a description, and she did a drawing of it, and we're going to have the story in the next book. But I'd heard of tales like that before, but this was the first time I actually got to talk firsthand to the person who claimed to have seen the thing.
Yeah, that's very odd. That's very odd because I had something similar happen where Woody and I went down, and it's the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. And I had been hunting all over the place, and I'd never seen anything like this. We had stumbled in. It doesn't quite compare to the story you told, but where it looked like the branches had been twisted like you would twist a matchstick. And they were all in this one area. They were all twisted and going down. It's a long story. I'll give you the very, very short version of it. But we were walking down this hill, and to get down this hill, you know, I had boots on, and you know, it was tough to get down this hill. And there was this human-like footprint. This is before I had an encounter, before I really believed in Bigfoot. There was this human-like footprint that you could tell where it actually had stepped as it was going down this hill. And it wasn't that big, you know, I'd say probably 14 inches, 15 inches. It wasn't big enough for you to go, wow, that's, you know, it's King Kong through here. You know, I thought maybe I was trying to figure out why a guy would take his shoes off and walk down this hill. It's the worst place you could do it. But as we walked down this hill, there was a tree that was pulled out of the ground. When I say pulled out of the ground, I mean pulled out of the ground and thrown across the trail. And we walked across the tree, and we were kind of looking at the area and kind of getting a creeped out feeling like we were being watched. So we left, and I was telling Woody, you know, we got to go back and take pictures of that. We got to get pictures of that footprint, and just the way the trees were. Whoever mutilated these trees had to have big hands and a lot of strength. I'm talking big branches twisted like matchsticks. And the one tree that was yanked out of the ground and thrown. Well, we went back, I don't know, a couple days later, a week later, something like that. And Woody and I said the exact same thing. We said like it was a crime scene that was cleaned up. You would never know there was a tree yanked out of the ground. All of the branches and everything were all gone. But it's not like someone came in with a chainsaw. It's like it never happened. Like it was a crime scene that was cleaned up. And so it's fascinating that guy said it like the area had been sanitized. Why do you think there is? Why do you think there is a cover-up?
I don't know why they seem to do that, but I think you're right. I think there is a cover-up, but I can't answer why. Yeah,
it's very strange. Well, Doug, I'll have to have you back on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you and having you share.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. And if people are down there in Southeastern Ohio, how could they get a hold of you, Doug, if they want to talk to you about what they've seen?
Well, they can get a hold of me through my Facebook page or our Southeastern Ohio Society for Bigfoot Investigation page. And we've kind of finished up our speaking engagements for this year. We're going to take a couple months off, and I'm going to work on this new book, and then we'll start again next year. And been doing about 20 talks a year, you know, whether at libraries or conferences and stuff. But best place is through Facebook, or they could email me too.
Well, Doug, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Wes.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Please visit sasquatchchronicles.com, and I will see you guys next time.
My wheels on tone.